AC, today we're going way beyond Hammerland to the rocky shores of Scotland for a special 50th anniversary celebration. Yes, today we have an appointment with the WICKER Man.
Summer is a coming in. I'm so glad that we decided to do this in May, just at the tail end of May. So it would have been great if we snuck it in on May Day, but I'm super excited because yes, this one does correlate very nicely with the springtime and all things fertile. And I'm very excited to talk about it.
I am too. Now, May Day, as you may or may not know, is actually also French for help me. And I'm going to need a little bit of assistance here with the WICKER Man because as with so many of our
it's unlike any other film you've ever seen. And that's one of the things that I love about it, because I came to this late in my, horror discoverings. For years, I'd seen the stills of the WICKER Man, most prominently, Christopher Lee holding his hand up with his wild hair. And having only known Christopher Lee as Dracula, to see him in this kind of tweed suit with his hair, I was like, what is this movie? And but it rarely was on television, or if it was, I never was there at the same time. And it didn't get a lot of play on VHS. I just don't remember it being on the shelves much. And I happened to come across it when there was an anniversary release on DVD. And I took it home and I really was just kind of blown away. I was like, what? I've never, ever seen a movie like this before. Is this even a horror film? Even though the ending is so horrific. And I was like, and it's got Ingrid Pitt in it, and it's got Christopher Lee. And I was like, I love this movie. Now, I get it if maybe you aren't as enamored with it right off the bat, but it was one of those that I immediately watched again. I watched it and I was like, I got to see that again. And I literally watched it back to back. And it's even more enjoyable the second time around because of the mystery elements and the way that they kind of lay in those clues as you're going along. And it's kind of like I say, it's a magical piece of work for me because it's so different than any other movie. And yet it's been so inspirational. You can see its footprints and its fingerprints on so many future films. All the way up to Midsommar from Ari Aster.
And the WICKER Man remake from 2006 with Nicolas Cage stepping in for our
Edward Woodward.
Edward Woodward playing Sergeant Howie, which
Yep.
that's first off the bat, when he's referred to as Sergeant Howie, at first I thought are they really using his first name? Or I expected it's Howard, but no, it's just, that's his last name.
That's his last name.
Yeah, I need to watch this movie again.
Hmm.
I think it might be a while because that ending was so traumatic and so different from everything that had come before it that I don't know if I want to watch this for a while.
Well, even having seen, this is my question, because even having seen the Nicolas Cage one prior, which I know you have,
which I own, yes,
we'll talk about that. Did it still have an impact for you?
The ending?
Yes. Okay.
Because, it's the WICKER Man is one of those movies that I've seen it once, and it was probably right when the 2006 version. I saw it once, probably when it first came out on video or shortly thereafter. I was over, my wife and I were at a friend's house. You've got to see this terrible Nicolas Cage movie. So we put it on. I immediately fell in love. And for the next decade plus, it's been a running joke and a source of annoyance where I talk about how much I love that movie because they put it on as this is something you'll never want to watch or think of again. It's an abomination. Right. Special place in my heart.
Okay.
But I think the key difference is, and again, I've only watched it the one time, but the ending where Nicolas Cage is, again, spoilers for a 50-year-old movie and an 18-year-old movie, or 17. Nicolas Cage plays a cop who goes to this countryside, village to investigate a missing girl. And the same thing with the original Wicker Man, although it's a British police officer going to investigate Scotland, the Scotland Highlands, whatever. At the end, he realizes he's the victim. He's fallen prey to a cult. They basically shove him inside this giant Wicker Man of the title, which is I don't know, like a 50-foot wooden structure that looks like a man, and they set it on fire with him inside. Although in the Nicolas Cage version, I think they put bees on his face or something. That was one of the famous lines of him screaming, "Bees! You bitches! You bitches! Bees! No!" You can see it on YouTube, I think. It's great. It's over the top, but
yes,
didn't have any impact besides comedic value. The ending of the original Wicker Man is genuine horror, because Edward Woodward's character it's a portrayal of the Christian man, the faithful, that I have not seen a lot in movies, because typically there is some level of hypocrisy, in the people who claim to be very devout and everything. And so you're kind of like, well, but this guy, he genuinely ran up against, he is a devout man who ran up against the forces of evil, and he won spiritually, but he lost terribly in terms of the physical world. And you feel just so bad for him, because you realize that he's really suffering in those last final moments. It's kind of
he's waiting. He's waiting for his God to save him, and that God never comes.
I disagree. I don't think.
Okay.
I think he's resigned to the idea that he is going to, because he says what he's asking for is comfort, because he realizes there's no way out. He says something to the effect of, I know it's going to be a few moments of fiery torture, but please save me from the eternal, damnation, because he realizes that he's a Christian, but as with all Christians who are, devout, they understand that they have some level of sin. So he's hoping that the scales balance out in the face of what he's going through.
And kind of similar to Last Temptation of Christ, it's like, will he reject his maker at this moment?
Yes.
And I think that's also what he's asking for, is asking for the strength to hold on to his faith and not despair. But we are kind of like jumping to the end of what is kind of an incredible journey. And this film, generally the version that is seen is about a 90-minute version. But there are extended cuts that have a lot more of Christopher Lee as Lord Summerisle talking about the background and the various apples and things like that. And, it's kind of a joke in that they cut out all the scenes that Christopher Lee loves so much. But I mean, it's a lot of him talking about apples. And you're like, I don't know that we need all that, Chris. But as you said, Sergeant Howie comes to the island of Summerisle, and he is looking for a missing girl. He's been notified of a missing girl, Rowan Martin. And he gets there, and people are strange in that they won't even acknowledge Rowan, like that she existed at all. And when they are confronted with it, they're like, oh, well, she's not dead though. And you're like, well, where is she then? It's like, she, and that's kind of the mystery, is that he has an entire village that will not give him a straight answer, and that subscribes to a completely different religion. And as you said, he's very devout. And so all this paganism in his face, I think he feels righteously insulted. And yet there is the barkeeper's daughter, Willow, and he is sorely tempted by in the form of Britt Eklund, who later would marry Peter Sellers. Or I think she was not. Was she married to Peter Sellers at this point? Anyway, but she is there, and she tempts Howie, and Howie, remains steadfast. And that's kind of what makes him the perfect, spoiler, sacrifice, is that he's someone who comes freely of his own will. He's someone who's devout. He's someone who's a virgin. That's the other thing. And again, kind of sad and pathetic that he is a virgin. He believes so strongly. He's like, I'm going to wait until I'm married. I find the right person.
Well, he did find the right person, because he mentions that he has a fiance
right.
back home.
But they have not had sex yet. That's another scene that doesn't, that's a scene that got cut out. You see him interacting with his fiance and going out and saying, you know, not tonight, honey, you know, it'll be worth it when we're married.
Well, first of all, I want to offer a brief correction. It is Rowan Morrison is the name.
Morrison, sorry. Yep.
Rowan Martin co-created Laugh-In.
And there it was.
Which I would like to see.
I want to see that version. Yes.
I want to see
Rowan and Martin present Laugh-In with Wicker Man.
Well, no, I want to see a detective going to a Scottish island looking for the co-creator of Laugh-In who's gone missing. But yeah, that sort of makes it, I think, even more tragic, is we find out the information about the fiance way late in the movie, right, because we're just dealing with this cop, but you realize he's got this entire other life outside this investigation. And what's so interesting about this kind of clash of religious, you know, points of view is he feels very confident, I think, that he can be victorious, because if he goes back home and says, hey, there's a bunch of these weird pagans doing strange stuff with children and there's sex all over the place, that the ostensibly, I guess, Christian, you know, authorities will come with him and put a stop to this. He just never kind of gets that chance. So there is a sense of, you know, might makes right, you know, power in numbers, but he just, when he's out there on his own, that, you know, doesn't quite protect him.
Well, and he's isolated, you know, like he can't get back, you know, like the seaplane that brought him there is not going to bring him back.
Now, you mentioned this was an influential movie.
Yes.
And again, having only watched it the one time, I was struck by, you asked at the beginning, is this even a horror movie? I think it is at the very end, and perhaps even throughout, because the idea is the creeping realization of how isolated this guy is. It becomes like a strangulation, but it's just so goofy.
Yeah, it is, you know, weird.
It's a musical in parts.
Yes. Yeah, no, there's so many songs. There's an entire soundtrack of songs.
What are some of the okay, there's a song called The Landlord's Daughter.
Yep.
The Green Man Inn. There's something about like barley and corn. I don't know what's going on here.
Barley rigs. Corn rigs, rather. Corn rigs.
What are those? I don't know.
I mean, the thing is that, and that's part of what makes this film so unique, is that there is so much music kind of woven in, and that is what is creating the atmosphere that you truly aren't anywhere you've been before. Like there's just a sense of, and there's a real sense of ancient, you know, community, ancient lore. And the fact that there is all this just kind of like communal singing and sharing, and it's like sex is so blatantly discussed. You know, they talk about, you know, the man's penis in the class, you know, and that the maypole represents, you know, it's like, and like the women have no clothes on, they're jumping through the fire as part of a fertility ritual. And all of this is so shocking to Howie, who's very prim and proper and buttoned down British. And it's kind of great to see kind of like Lord Summerisle, played by Christopher Lee. This was one of his favorite roles, if not his favorite role, certainly at the time. And the idea that he's not a mustache twirling villain, like he's very affable. He's a very, you know, germane host. And he's kind of like, why are you getting so angry? Why are you getting so upset? You know, and when, you know, how he's like, oh, I'm going to get to the bottom. He's just like, I hope you do. I hope you do get to the bottom of it.
Well, and it does offer a terrific question. I mean, this movie is very strange because I don't know what the marketing was like, if you could even consider things, you know, like marketing back in 1973, but was Christopher Lee like on the poster? Was he promoting this? Because I could very much see this being a situation where you go into this movie called The Wicker Man. It's very strange. You hear Lord Summerisle's name mentioned throughout, and he's referenced. He doesn't show up until like the last 20 minutes of the movie. And then he's maybe the last half hour, because he's revealed.
Lord Summerisle?
Yeah, Christopher Lee's
Lord
character.
Summerisle is in almost from the get-go. Like
he's mentioned, but we don't see him.
No. You meet him at least like 20, 25 minutes in, because he plays that he's threaded through. I mean, he leads the parade, and like he's pretty prominent, I think.
But the parade is much later.
No, I know that. I'm saying, like, you meet him early on.
I would have to go back and watch that, because I distinctly remember getting to a certain point and feeling like it was 2/3 of the way through, and he's sort of, revealed. Now we do, because he's talked about, they mentioned the whole thing about the different characters in the parade, like the half man, half dog. Yep. The man dressed as a woman, and that turns out to be Chritopher Lee. That it reminded me of House of a Thousand Corpses, what was going on with Bill Moseley kind of towards the end, another sort of procession.
Yeah.
But he's not, I mean, most of this movie, my recollection of it, having watched it, finished it yesterday.
Yeah.
Is that
I wouldn't say he's got a lot of screen time, but I do say that we do meet him earlier than like the last half hour.
Okay. Again, my recollection of it is he's spoken of a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But most of Howie's encounters in the town are with the other village, the village people. Yeah, I'm gonna, you've seen this movie more than I have, but having watched it very recently, my very recent recollection is that he is sort of revealed, mentioned a lot, but we don't see him until much later in the picture. And then
later is a relative term, but yeah, I mean, you don't meet him right off the bat, but you do meet him within the first like half hour.
Okay. That we'll have to check the tape on that one,
okay.
Johnny.
Okay.
But the Wicker Man for sure is the last 10 minutes of the film.
That's right.
Which is an odd, I mean, I guess it is the big set piece, but it is kind of a strange idea, because the Wicker Man isn't even, I don't think that's talked about as far as like being the big finale ritual. That is truly something that is a surprise to Howie, certainly, and to us. There's that great shot of him kind of coming up over the hill, being, led to his doom. And he's like, oh God, oh no. And he understands exactly what he's looking at, even though it's so strange. It's a giant wooden man with livestock caged up in different compartments. And then he's going to go right in the center. But the thing is, like, up until that point, there is weirdness in the movie, but not anything I would call cinematic suspense. I mean, I'm thinking of something like Midsommar, which owes like everything, I think, to the Wicker Man, pretty much. And as much as I'm not a fan of Ari Aster in general, and that movie in particular, I think there are moments throughout where I'm like, yeah, this is taking something that is presented as being weird, presented as being potentially harmless, but there's danger underneath, and really putting getting me on edge while I'm watching it. In this movie, everything is just kind of flat. Like he's going, goes to the bar and sees all these weird people singing. He goes outside the bar, and it's nighttime, and there's an orgy happening, like in the field right next to the bar.
Right.
And he's just kind of standing there, and it cuts. He's like, the next day he's like waking up or something. It's not that it was a dream. It's just he didn't do anything about it. Like,
right. Well,
and I don't get the sense that he's there. There wasn't a sense to me of him thinking, am I dreaming? Do I go and tap someone on the shoulder and start writing them a ticket? Like, what do I do here? It's just presented as a fact, and then it cuts to something completely different.
Well, I think he's utterly frustrated by it. Like, he's like, this is not how decent people behave in this day and age. And he's affronted by it. And I think that's kind of what I love is that culture clash, that he is there. He thinks he's in the right throughout. He thinks that his way is the only way. And to go outside of, quote, civilized behavior is wrong. And then you've got Chritopher Lee and all of the characters that are like, it's okay, you just don't understand. You're not familiar with our ways. And he's like, no, your ways are barbaric. Your ways are wrong. And I love how that kind of plays out throughout, because that's where, for me, that's where the suspense is watching him pursue, his quarry of trying to find Rowan Morrison, and nobody cooperating, but almost in a really polite way. It's like, I can't help you because you don't understand. You do not understand our ways. And
I think
you've judged them as, as foreign equals wrong.
I think there's a bit more to it than that, because
there's a lot more to it than that. But then, yes.
Well, but what occurs to me is, yeah, I can understand different religions, different lifestyles, and all that. But from the moment Howie shows up, pretty much, there are acts of subterfuge and things being hidden because of their fear of being discovered. Now, there could be a larger question of the people on the mainland just wouldn't understand our religious practices, or maybe we're being persecuted or whatever. But you get the idea. This is a completely secret society. They take down the picture that would have had Rowan in it from all the different the festivals that basically show the sacrifices each year, to all the weird stuff going on, the strange intimidations of, at one point, Howie is going like house to house looking through to see if he can find this girl, and a girl falls out of a wardrobe, apparently dead, and she's got like blood trickling out of her mouth, and then he looks down and she starts like giggling maniacally. I'm like, what is going on here? And all the weird animal people in the animal masks and costumes, which I feel like showed up in The Shining a few years later. There is so much going on here, but I just feel like the direction is so flat that I almost feel like the idea was, what if we made a horror movie that wasn't really horrific? It was just the ideas.
Yes.
Like that takes, I think there may have been people who've come along in the 50 years since that have done a better job of that. But yeah, that doesn't quite work here for me anyway. On the first viewing.
Absolutely. And I understand what you mean, and that it doesn't feel like a horror film. And there's something, for me, there was something about the wonderful strangeness of it throughout. And like, how much of this is just the village and how they behave, and how much of it is purely for his benefit. And I think that's kind of, that's the exciting thing. Is like, is it all a masquerade? Is it all a play? And I just love how you can watch it over and over, and you may never have the answer as to what is for his benefit and what is just absolutely their culture.
And you might have some more insight than I do, but it felt like towards the end, because he puts on this parade, this farce of being part of the parade. He does the classic thing of, he finds someone who's going to be in the parade because everybody's in costumes, they're very well disguised. He basically knocks that guy out, steals his costume, and joins the parade. And that's sort of kind of farcical because he's not dancing crazily enough for their liking, so someone chides him for that. But eventually he sees Rowan standing at the mouth of this cave, and he basically storms up to her and is like, trying to untie her and get her through these caves. And he comes out the other side, and everybody's waiting for him. Now, in this cliffside conversation, it almost felt, and I feel like there was a line, I could be mistaken, that they had sort of lured him to the island.
Yes.
Not that they had figured out, well, we got this cop on our hands, what do we do? But there was almost like he was called here as sort of destiny somehow. Like they knew that if they put up this missing girl thing, that somehow they would get him because he was so devout and in his faith. That's what makes the sacrifice to their God even more, delicious.
Right. And that's a little, granted, that's a little convenient. I can't remember how they specifically, knew that he would be the one to come. But yes, I got the sense that somebody, was aware of this Sergeant Howie and how he would be the perfect sacrifice.
Yeah. I don't know if that was any of the extended or cut scenes, or maybe they left it out because they didn't involve, or maybe
and he plays
apples.
In the parade that he's talking, that you're talking about, he plays, the character of the fool, which is absolutely fitting, as opposed to the bear that Nicolas Cage ends up, the bear suit that Nicolas Cage ends up donning.
Well, and that's also call back to Midsommar, that there was a big bear suit at the end with the unfortunate guy who was burned alive in the tent. Spoiler. But the one thing I will say, the horror definitely ramps up. Even before we get to the Wicker Man, there's this crazy ritual that is telegraphed in a way that it was disturbing to look at just the drawings, because there's sort of like these drawings of different parts of the ritual that telegraph what we're going to see later. And one of them is a bunch of swords drawn together, crisscrossed into a pentagram.
Yep.
And what they do is at the end, the kind of climax of the parade, is they have a number of people. It's almost like a limbo line or something like that.
Yeah, right. They all line up.
6 people cross their swords, and the parade has to cross under them and stop beneath the swords. They lower this pentagram sword down over the heads of the people, and if the music stops,
then
off with their head. And we do see that, but it turns out it's another ruse. But it's this great moment of tension, certainly.
And we think that that's what it's. Yeah, we think that it's for Howie. We think that that this may be part of the plot.
And I would think, what's your thought on that? Do you think that they did that for his benefit, or if he hadn't been part of this, do you think they would have done like a mini sacrifice or would they have done the sword thing at all?
I don't know. And I get, this is kind of the what I love about it is like, I don't know how much of this is for his benefit and how much of it is part of the actual parade. Like I love that there's a world in which they just rehearsed this entire thing just for his benefit.
I'd like to see that.
Do you like the songs?
Again, that's something I have to appreciate or not appreciate on a second viewing. They are emblematic of my problem with this film, and it is unfair, I think, to the Wicker Man. It's not what I expected. It's this thing that I've been hearing about for decades. It's something that was so cult popular that they remade it. And the 2006 version, as all ridiculous and Nicolas Caged up as it is a horror movie, right? More boldly stated. So when I'm watching this and I'm hearing musical numbers, I'm like, okay, this number, like the first like big one that came to my mind was the one they were singing in the bar about the barman's daughter or whatever. Right. I'm like,
landlord's daughter. Yeah.
The landlord's daughter. This is strange, especially at one point she's like bumping and grinding on one of the patrons and he's like all up in her business. I'm like, how is this at all okay? But the songs keep coming back and I'm like, where's the suspense? What am I watching? Did I put in the wrong film?
Well, what about, okay, so how about the scene of Willow, her dance, Willow's Dance, where she's in the room next to Howie, and it's Britt Eklund in her all together and doing a dance, and Howie, like, I don't know, he just like senses that she's over there naked because he doesn't see her, but it's like he just senses her energy. And I think that's a really kind of incredible scene.
The idea of it is incredible. I think the execution is poor because there are way too many, and not that I have a problem with seeing a nude Britt Eklund, but there's a sensuality to erotic dance, I guess, that if you're filming it mostly in wide shots, it just looks goofy. She's like twirling around the room, like grinding against the wall and shaking her ass and everything. I'm like, if this was done in like, tightly edited close-ups and kind of like chopped into a montage, I think it would speak more to perhaps.
It'd be absolutely what you'd expect, though.
Right. But what I expect is something that works, because in my mind, what we are seeing is the literal truth of what's going on, when what we should be considering is the temptation that Howie is feeling, to your point, not being able to see what's going on, but having a sense of that. And I think his vivid imagination of this nude woman, it wouldn't be a wide shot of a woman kind of like goofily grinding against the wall. It'd be more accentuating certain body parts and rhythms and movements. It'd be a masturbatory fantasy. This it's shot kind of straight on, and I don't know. It
didn't work for you. I get it.
It didn't. Yeah.
Yeah. It absolutely works for me. Like, I think it's an extraordinarily sensual and sexy and exciting piece, and it's juxtaposed with the fact that she's direct address singing to the camera, or lip syncing in this case, but like it's this like strange what am I trying to say, serenade. It's like a strange serenade with a dance that I'm just like, and again, it's just so like weird and yet fully inhabited. Like, it doesn't feel awkward or performative. It feels like this is This is something that has been practiced for all time. You know, it just feels like it's just part of the and to your point about the landlord's daughter song, I mean, I think that's what Howie finds so offensive, is that it doesn't even seem like they're doing it deliberately to be bawdy. It's like, no, this is just how the song goes, and this is like that. It's okay to be sexualized, and it's like all of that completely flies in the face of what he believes to be true.
Yeah, I mean, fair point. What I will say, and you kind of helped crystallize something for me, my issue with the dance scene in the adjacent hotel rooms. It looks like you mentioned something that's been kind of well rehearsed and practiced. I think that's it. It feels like to me, and this is maybe because I've watched a ton of movies in the last 50 years, or in the spanning the 50 years since this movie came out.
Sure.
And I've seen these kind of like erotic temptation kind of sequences before.
Yeah.
It looks like they filmed the scene and maybe they had some notes about, this is kind of flat. This isn't sexy or tense or getting anything across. We should go reshoot this. Maybe get some close-ups, maybe do something with the lighting or the music, but it's just kind of flat. But they forgot to go back and reshoot it. This feels very first draft to me.
Huh,
like they worked hard on it, they filmed it, and they're like, I mean, it worked for you, so yeah, everything is
or they were like,
I guess.
This is absolutely what we wanted. And just
watching the rest of the movie, I can say that's probably the case. Yes.
Fun fact is that's actually some of that is not Britt Ekland, because especially the stuff from behind, because she was pregnant at the time. And so that is a body double that is shaking her ass at the camera. That was an exotic dancer that they hired from the town. And Britt Ekland was most displeased to see herself portrayed in that way. She's like, I don't look anything like that, but there you go.
What?
That's not Britt's bottom that we see in the film.
Oh, okay. I don't know. I guess it makes sense. I thought you were saying that she was offended that sequence ended up in the film. It's like, well,
no, she was offended that they hired somebody with who was bumping and grinding and with a bigger bottom than she possessed.
I would have to do the Pepsi challenge on that one. I can't speak to it, but
and also one of our favorites, Ingrid Pitt, is back as well. And I think she adds a lovely touch to it.
Yeah, I thought she was a little bit of of mystery and coyness. I think that the movie really needed. I think she and Chritopher Lee definitely. I like the last half hour of this movie more than I liked the preceding hour. I think in a lot of respects, and she was a big part of that.
And I think, and I do think that on repeat viewings, that you will warm to the earlier part, only because you kind of will know what you're in for.
Yes.
And it is a movie I've seen many, many times at this point. And I love how it is so much its own thing and unapologetically so. Anthony Schaffer, who wrote the screenplay, he had a big hit with the film, or with the stage play Sleuth, which was later then turned into a film with Laurence Olivier and Michael Caine, which came out in 1972, just prior to this. So his name was bankable. And so that's why, Anthony Schaffer is writ large across the credits. And Robin Hardy, he wasn't a huge name as far as the directors go, but he was absolutely, I think, the right person, because he just embraced how strange this was going to be. One other person we should mention is Diane Salento, who plays she is the school teacher. And she was actually Mrs. Sean Connery at the time. And wow. I think she lends, along with Chritopher Lee, she does a lot of the exposition. So I think she does a really nice job of, again, kind of being unapologetic about our ways are not your ways, and that's okay.
Yeah. I mean,
what do you think about Chritopher Lee in this film?
it weirded me out that he was wearing sneakers, like like canvas tennis shoes or something. I don't know. He did have this like in that famous outfit, the yellow or mustard kind of turtleneck or whatever, and the tweed jacket and the shoes
Mm.
and the crazy hair. It was so unlike other performances of his. I can understand why it was his favorite. To me, it kind of had the same problem up until the very last scene. It had the same problem for me that the rest of the movie did. It was very kind of matter of fact. I didn't get the sinister cat and mouse kind of angle to it. I just got
Mm.
the sense that he was sort of the charismatic kind of cult leader. I did like the fact that there wasn't a whole lot of mysticism to the island. There was a bit, but it was more grounded in science. Like, well, my grandfather discovered this,
Right.
hybrid fruit and vegetable thing, and we came here and then we started this cult or whatever. The very last scene where Howie is yelling at the people who are surrounding him, saying, look, if the harvest, you think that by killing me, the next harvest is going to be better than the last.
Right.
Well, it's not going to make a difference. And when I'm dead, the next person you're going to have to attack is, your Lord Summerisle.
Right.
And Summerisle, you can see that look on Lee's face. I think it's the best acting he does in the entire film. You're not sure, or it's that moment where you're like, I don't think this guy believes his own bullshit. I think he's confident enough that he's surrounded by rubes who will believe anything.
Right.
But there's that moment of tension, like this could really go either way. I've got to amp up the leadership here so they don't figure anything out.
Well, and I think that there is that kind of wonderful, it's a great play that he didn't think Howie had up his sleeve, that he could turn it. And who knows? I mean, like, certainly, if you want to go into a political, contemporary, like who would have thought that you could say, well, if Donald Trump does this outlandish act, people will reject him, and yet they don't. And you're like, huh, okay. I would think that would have worked, but it didn't. To your point about Christopher Lee, yes, I think it's an atypical performance. I think that's what he liked about it, was that he wasn't asked to be a villain at face value, and that there was texture to him, and that there was a reason behind what he was doing, why he was doing what he was doing. Does he believe his own bullshit? I think on some level, like, he really wants to. I think he believes that this could be the thing. I also think he's like, we got to try something.
Well, but I think that's sort of the key at the heart of this story is if he does believe his own nonsense. I might have missed something, but where does the whole mysticism and the belief in the harvest god and the god of the sea or the sun and all this other stuff, it's it's like a melange of different beliefs.
Yes.
I don't know that I understand where all that comes from, especially when the story is his grandfather came here because he discovered this, hybrid fruit that he could grow or whatever. How do you get from breakthrough science discovery to batshit mysticism?
And I don't know the answer. Like this whole village is so kind of caught up in these pagan, rituals and things like that. So is it just that that's a convenient thing to wrap around the science? I don't know.
And it would have been, I don't know, I feel like, yeah, maybe not, because I don't think Midsummer dealt with this that well either. Neither did the Wicker Man remake, to my recollection. But the idea that everybody in this town is swept up, they are true believers. There's no question, especially when Howie at the end is like, it could, your leader is going to have to be next if this doesn't work out. There's no moment where someone says, well, maybe I'm next, or maybe my daughter is going to be the next harvest sacrifice, and that sucks. Or are they like, well, that'd be great because it brings honor to, our family and pleasing the gods. That's a level of detail that I think that in the hour and a half, we could have gotten a bit more nuance besides, okay, now I'm going to go talk to the weird candy shop owner. Now I'm going to talk to the weird pub owner. Now I'm going to go outside and stand in the field and watch people have sex. And he's just kind of, I understand earlier you described his feelings about that, sexual orgy, but we never see that. He doesn't wrestle with that on camera. We are meant to infer that by things that happen later.
I mean, his reactions, I mean, he definitely demonstrates that he's not pleased with this. Like, I agree that it maybe doesn't happen in the moment, but that could just be the shock and surprise of it.
I mean, his reaction in the moment is he goes out and he stands there, and we cut to more close-ups of the people having sex in the field. Right. When we see Howie, he's standing there being filmed from behind in a wide shot. And there's no expression on his face of like horror or like kind of a sleepy, like, is he dreaming all of this? There's no context.
Okay. I read that as him being stunned and shocked and then, offended. Because then he comes inside and he's like, what, and he asked to get to his room.
Yeah. At no point though did he say, like, did you know there's people screwing outside? Because that would have been an interesting conversation. Like, did you know that there's an orgy happening out, just outside your door? And people being like, what? Let's go see. Or no. Or yeah, that's kind of how we do things around here. That would have opened up, I think, the story a little bit earlier. Instead, he's shot. I understand that you're saying he has all these reactions, but you can't tell that by looking at someone standing, 50 feet away, filmed from the back.
Well, right. But it happens. I mean, he does comment on it not long after. I mean, it's not like you have to wait very long to see how he feels about it.
Okay. That's fair.
That's all. The ending, I mean, it's a joyful ending. That's the other thing that's so kind of horrifying, is that you have people just standing and singing and smiling, and like, it's a joyous ending for everybody except for Sergeant Howie.
And that's where it gets. I'm glad we're coming back to the ending, because I think we're kind of winding down, but it's a very strange ending for me to watch, because I could see it as being a very like sinister ending, like, hey, evil triumphed. And we burned the Christian inside the Wicker Man. I don't see it that way. I see it as a tragic victory on the part of Officer Howie, because I'm thinking, if his God is real, the Christian God, and I am a Christian as well, watching this movie, I'm not watching that celebration and thinking anything more than, well, all those people are mortal, and they know that what they're doing on some level is wrong, due to the subterfuge, due to the idea that, I mean, if they have no value for human life, that they can just, sacrifice a person that grew up in their village to this weird pagan god, they're going to be dancing all right in the flames of eternity. So yeah, I found it to be a very kind of darkly uplifting ending, if that makes any sense, because Howie was true to himself and true to his faith from the start to the finish, and he wasn't revealed to be any kind of a hypocrite. He avoided the temptations,
absolutely,
as we talked about, and he constantly did the right thing, even in the face of people coming after him, from trying to run, get into the parade and run away with the girl through the caves, to just facing down his fate. He didn't try very hard to get away. Maybe he just realized that he was on a cliff and there was 100 people.
Where's he going to go? Right.
But yeah, I think it was a very cool ending, but not because, the Christian fell at the hands of the pagan worshipers.
See, I'm completely on the other side of it, and that's okay, because for me, it's like he proved himself to be they picked the right person, and it is going to please their gods, and their harvest will be fruitful. Like, that's my takeaway, is like, that's what's going to happen. Like, they chose, and that the joy is real, and that I don't think they have any remorse. I think they feel like we did the right thing to save our village and to have a fruitful harvest next year. And and should we have to sacrifice one of our own, I mean, we didn't have to this time because we needed something special, but should we have to sacrifice one of our own? That's just part of the deal. And but that foreign quality is shocking to our Western minds. But the idea of like, yeah, like this is seriously how it is on Summer Isle, and it's not like it is at home.
I can tolerate that up to a point, but when it comes to no, I mean serious, like when it comes to, ritual human sacrifice
Right.
for what you might call earthly gain, because they believe that unless they do this, they're not going to have, good crops. I mean,
Right.
that goes against, whether you care for this or not, it goes against the Christian ethos of,
Sure.
yeah, you don't murder people. No matter how hard, times get, you don't have to sacrifice your fellow man in order to have, what you need in the world. But yeah, I call that objectively evil, what they're doing. And I think that is something that Summer Isle realizes. You can see his trying to subtly hold on to that power, not have people turn against him. I think if he was truly a man of his own faith, he wouldn't have been sweating it in that final scene. But he does have some doubts whether or not he's, it's like a children of the corn thing where he realizes the deity might be turning against him for other reasons, or whether he realizes, oh, this is a big con and I have to keep the rubes at bay and just get rid of this guy.
Or he's genuine. And when he says they will not fail, he means it. Like, because he says, Edward says, what would happen? What happens if they fail next year? And Christopher Lee's response is, they will not fail. We've done the right thing.
Right. My counter to that, and you might be right.
No, I really like the fact that you have a different perspective on it.
Well, I'm thinking about what we see of Lord Summer Isle, what we see of his residence. He's got a study. He's full of books. He's very he's full of books. His place is full of books. He's a very well-educated, well-read man, and his residence almost sticks out like a sore thumb compared to, perhaps, except for the classroom, the rest of the town is very much like a country rural.
Yeah.
Right. So I can very easily see when he says they won't fail, he understands if this is just a political kind of power grab, he can't say, well, maybe they won't. He's got to be strong in what he perceives as his convictions to keep the ruse up for everybody else.
Well, and as we just saw with the coronation of, of our new king, King Charles.
Not my new king. That's
we have people, there are plenty of people in Britain living in poverty, and yet they are like absolutely fascinated with the idea of having a monarch and making sure that money goes to maintain that, that residence. And, and yes, of course, there are some who are like, excuse me, can we not do that? But that wasn't what I saw when I was watching. I was like, wow, there are so many people who are invested in having this person, having this figurehead. And so to me, I'm like, yes, Lord Summer Isle makes total sense. Like, they want him to live in a grand house and be their lord.
Yeah. And again, that's
again foreign to me. Like, I'm like,
well, but I know.
How about we share the wealth a little bit?
Well, I think the bridge that's a bit too far, though, is like the people of Britain, to my knowledge, and I'm not going to get into the whole lizard overlord conspiracy, but I don't know that King Charles is demanding ritual sacrifice every year in order to maintain this grandeur. Hey, might be. Maybe he's got Lord Summer Isle on retainer. Who knows?
Well, but he's not demanding human sacrifice. It's only when the crops don't go well. And I think everybody understands, well, we got to have the crops have to go well. We understand that.
Maybe I missed something. I thought,
no. There's a May Queen every year.
Mm-hmm.
And then they hide Rowan's photo because she's going to have to be sacrificed.
Well, all right. So they don't sacrifice someone every year, but it's in the playbook that if things go south, we're gonna pick someone that's still barbaric, and that's over the line.
Judgment.
Yes, it is a judgment. Perfectly fine being judgmental. But I don't know.
It's just not how we roll in Summer Isle. We're totally fine with it. And I think that's the thing. Like, I find that idea is horrific. That idea that there is a culture that is okay with that. because we as civilized humans are like, that's not okay. And they are. And that's the thing. I'm like, I think they are. I think they are okay with it. And that's what's scary. The fact that they are singing and dancing and joyful at the end, it's because they believe it. They believe that they are doing the right thing. And I don't think they're worried about their eternal souls. I think they're worried, or I think they're just like, this is absolutely the right thing for us to have done, and good on us.
Yeah. And that gets back to, the kind of the difference between that worldview and I'd say the Christian worldview,
right?
Which is that, yeah, you're talking about, and how he basically, this is what he was praying for inside the Wicker Man, as the smoke and the flames were licking at his feet.
Right.
He was like, yeah, this sucks, but I understand that this is a passing moment, and I'm more concerned about, what's going to happen in eternity. Whereas the people on, it's Summer Isle, they're all about like, what's going to get us the best crops that we can enjoy while we're alive. I don't even know if did they talk about if there's an afterlife, a consideration of an afterlife. I mean, they're talking about gods ostensibly.
Right.
Did they mention anything about what they think happens after they shuffle off this mortal coil?
I don't know that we did get into that. Although, they did, actually, they talked about transference, right? They said, like the idea that like you become something else, like Rowan is a hare now, that idea.
Right. But that's still, and again, that doesn't really speak to spirituality. It speaks very much to materialism. What are they interested in? They're interested in food. They're interested in nature. They're interested in sex. They don't really seem to have a conception of like, yeah, my spirit goes into a hare. What happens when the hare dies? Does it go into a vegetable? I don't know.
I think that's the idea, is like, it is just kind of an ongoing circle of life, that the energy goes someplace.
Yeah.
So there is no fear of death, because there is no death. You just keep moving on through different iterations of nature.
Yeah. And there is sort of a corollary with I guess Christianity, the idea that there's not really a death. You are kind of born into the new, life, whether you're going up or down. Man, this conversation went places I wasn't expecting it to. I do want to close out with this question. Maybe it's a long one, I don't know. The Wicker Man is 50. And there's going to be like a theatrical, representation, I think, in the fall.
Right.
One of these companies is coming out with a deluxe, like 19
There's a five disc box set. It's $80. I forget who's the distributor, but yeah, if you Google, 5-disc 50th anniversary Wicker Man set, you will find it.
Why? I mean, not to disparage the film, but what do you think is it about this movie that kind of captured the imagination and kept it going in terms of cult status for half a century now?
Two things, I think. One is that I think it's a really fine film, and two is that it was hard to find for a long time, that it didn't enjoy kind of like the availability of, say, like The Exorcist or The Omen. Like, it was this movie that people heard about, and it kind of slipped away into obscurity, but always kind of lived on the fringes. And they would pop up with these little screenings here and there, and they discovered new footage, and they had a resurgence there. I think it's always just kind of like lived on the edges of our consciousness for a long time, in that a lot of us know about it, but hadn't experienced it firsthand. And then when you do experience it firsthand, it's nothing like what you think it's going to be. And that either resonates for you or doesn't. But I think if you watch it again and again, that it just kind of like, I love how weird this is. I love that I've never seen anything like this before. Or you don't, but it is one of those films that I think does capture the imagination in a way that a true cult classic does. It does not play by the rules. It completely subverts expectations. And even the horror doesn't feel like horror because it ends in a song. It's like,
yeah.
It's like, well, wait, that, like, I'm supposed to, how am I supposed to feel? And it's like, this movie doesn't tell you. It doesn't tell you how to feel. It just lays it all out there for you. And as you pointed out several times, like, we don't know what to believe. We don't know what we're supposed to be taking away. What is the message I'm supposed to be getting? And again, it kind of is unapologetic about, it is what it is. You decide what it is for you.
And I will say that I'm glad you brought up the very ending, because we see the Wicker Man collapse, and it sort of reveals the setting sun.
Yeah.
And there's the end credits sort of off to the left-hand side, and the sun sets. It doesn't quite go all the way down. There's like a harsh cut, which I think would have been cool if it dissolved a bit more. But it is this neat idea of like the flaming Wicker Man revealing the sun, which is then going down. Not sure what it means, but it feels very poetic. Yeah, I'm open to watching this movie again. Maybe we'll come back for the 100th anniversary. By then we'll be like on life support talking about the Wicker Man. But okay, maybe.
What are you talking about? I'm eating lots of apples. I'm going to be fine.
You're not sacrificing people, are you? Though. Oh, I guess your apple crop.
I was going to say,
so don't have to.
Yeah, don't ask questions you don't want the answer to.
Well, I want the answer to AC, where people can find you. I know the answer, but go ahead and tell us about yourself.
Well, right here on YouTube, you can swing on over to Horror 101 with Dr. AC. We've got our Friday Night Frights episodes. We've got Terror Tuesdays. We've got mini reviews on Sundays. And it's all about kind of getting people in and sharing the scare. So you'll see lots of different guests come on the show with me, very similar to the show you're enjoying here. So if you like this, come on over and enjoy some of this over here.
Yeah, it's excellent stuff. I mean, once you like discovered or decided to go full bore on YouTube, there's been no stopping you. So I'm amazed by all the stuff you keep putting out, and it's consistent, and you're really growing. It's awesome to see.
I appreciate that. And thank you again, sir, for the inspiration.
Oh, well. All right. We'll stop thanking each other and just say we'll be back next month. I can't remember what we're talking about.
I can't either because we switched things around. So it'll be a surprise for June.
Woo! All right. Well, until then, whenever that is, whatever that is, thanks, everybody. If you like this show, please like and subscribe. And, of course, check out all of Aaron's stuff. Links will be in the description below. And, yeah, we're leaving Hammerland for now, but we'll be back next month going beyond, again, Hammerland.